everyone, welcome back to my channel. We're gonna go ahead and get into the new palettes that were launched from Hourglass. I cannot believe it's that time of year. Like 2024 has kind of flown by. These are the new ambient lighting edit unlocked palettes from Hourglass. They launched 3 of them this year. I went ahead and grabbed all 3 of them. In this video, I'm gonna be trying on each one of the palettes so that you guys can see how it looks on my skin. For reference, I'm a medium skin with like a warm undertone, and I will leave a list in the description box down below of popular foundations out on the market and what shades I wear in those foundations, just so you guys can get an idea of my complexion. And along with trying each one of the palettes on, I'm going to be doing tons of swatches and comparisons in this video, comparing these palettes next to other palettes from previous years, just so you guys can get an idea of what these palettes are and how they compare to what we already have in previous years. So let's go ahead and jump into the details. It says our highly anticipated ambient lighting edit unlock palettes return, featuring 3 new limited edition artwork and 5 new ambient lighting shades, meaning that each of the new palettes have 5 new shades, which I do like that they launched new shades in this year's palettes. Each palette includes 5 brand new shades of blush, bronzer, and highlight to diffuse, enhance, and add glow to the complexion, utilizing our groundbreaking photoluminescent technology. The powders filter out the harsh light and enhance the skin in any type of light. The shades can be used individually or layered together for a multi-dimensional soft glow finish. Hourglass will also donate 5% of the net profits from this year's collection to the Non-Human Rights Project, a U.S. organization working to secure fundamental rights for animals. Right now, these are available on the Hourglass website. I'm not exactly sure when these will launch at other retailers. Once I find them available on other retailers, I will post them in my community center and also on my Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, right here is my Instagram handle. Typically, I link them in my Instagram stories. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the application of these 3 palettes. Then we'll do the swatches and comparisons. Then once we get through that, I will go ahead and jump into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. So the first palette we have here is the Lotus Flower palette. And I would say, in my opinion, this is the darker of the 3 palettes. You can see just how beautiful and rich these tones are. Then we have the Evil Eye palette. I would say this is more of the medium palette of the 3. These tones are really pretty, and I'm excited to try them on. Then finally, we have the Dragon palette. The powders are a little bit lighter. The bronzer's a little lighter. The blushes are really pretty though, and this is a really pretty highlighter, but I would say it's definitely the lighter of the 3. All right, let's go ahead and first start with the Lotus Flower palette first. These are all new shades except for this shade right here. These shades are definitely a little too dark for my complexion, but I still wanted to kind of try it on. For those of you that have medium skin, maybe you're curious about this palette, I wanted to go ahead and try it on and show you guys what it looks like. I will not be using this shade because this is the finishing powder, and it's definitely a little bit too dark for my complexion. So I'm gonna grab this shade right here. This is the bronzer. I'm actually going to use this brush. I need something that's a little bit more dense. So on my complexion, this bronzer has a red undertone. It works. I mean, it's really pretty, and it's got a real pretty, like, rich color to it. Yeah, and this is going over foundation with no powder. I have 2 of these brushes, by the way. I have 2 of them. And I'm gonna go into this blush shade right here. Now this is rich in pigment, so I'm gonna be very careful. This picks up a lot. Really pretty. I mean, I don't really think I could wear these shades right here. They are quite dark, but we're gonna try a little bit of it. And then I'm going to kind of, it kind of has that like strawberry color. It's really pretty. These tones are really pretty. Really pretty. While we're at it, let's go in with this golden shade. Kind of sweep that. So pretty. Of course, I will be swatching this palette next to the other palettes that we have from Hourglass. Let's go ahead and try on the Dragon palette. And all of the shades are new in this palette except for this shade right here. I'm just gonna use the same brush that I used for the bronzer and blush, but I'm gonna wipe my brushes off here. I'm gonna take that bronzer brush and I'm gonna go into this shade right here. That's a beautiful bronzer. It's a very natural bronzer and it's very buildable. On my complexion, it has a warm base to it. I kind of want to go into this blush because I think it's really unique and pretty. Like this shade is really pretty. It's kind of got that rosy, like matte tone to it. It's just a really pretty kind of rose tone, but I'm really curious about this shade. That shade is called Peach Fusion, and I love peach blush, so it's the shade I want to grab. So I'm gonna kind of go at it like this. Gosh, that's a pretty shade. That is a beautiful blush. It has that kind of ambient glow to it. It's really, really pretty. Let's go into the highlighter. It's pretty. I'm gonna go into this finishing powder right here. Kind of place it. Gorgeous. If you have a medium complexion, this palette would totally work for you. None of the powders are too light. The bronzer is definitely buildable, and I think it would work great. Right. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of wipe off my base makeup, and when I come back, I'll get into the Evil Eye palette. So I'll be right back. Let's go ahead and play with the Evil Eye palette. Now in this palette, all of the shades are new except for this shade right here. This is Soft Light. The one thing that I do like about this powder in particular is that it's very wrinkle friendly. Like it does look really beautiful over wrinkles, texture, stuff like that. It's a really beautiful powder. So this is the Vibrant Coral. I'm gonna grab a little bit of that. Very pigmented, like a lot picks up. I mean, it's pretty, but it's definitely vibrant. Just go in really lightly, especially if you have a dense brush like I do. Like this is the BK Beauty Hot and Flashy collaboration, the A507 brush. That's what it is, right? Yeah. And this is a pretty dense, packed brush. So you just have to be careful with a brush like this, picking up powder like that, because a lot will pick up. But you can see that even though a lot picked up, it's a beautiful powder where it blends out really easily and looks really pretty. So I do like that. I kind of want to put this one on right here. I want to see what this shade looks like all on its own, because I'm sure, you know, I kind of feel like these are going to be very similar on me because that's what happened in last year's palette. Like those types of shades just looked really similar on me. So I kind of have a feeling that's going to happen, but I want to put this shade on right here because I want to see what this shade does. I can't get that shade to pop up. Like, it gives you a little bit of color, but it almost feels like it's more of a blush topper. My husband just got home, so my dogs are going nuts. But I can't really get that shade to pop up. I'm going to swatch it. Oh, I see why. Okay, so what is that shade? I mean, it really has nothing to it. Yeah. I don't really like that shade. So that's what it looks like. And it's kind of like an orange, it's kind of an orange shiny shade, and I don't really like it. Personally, it's just not for me. And if you have medium to tan skin, it's really not going to show up on you. It's going to take a lot to show up, and I don't really like the way that looks. Not my favorite. I don't know why they chose that shade. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this shade right here. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, these two shades right here look very similar. Like, you would never know I was wearing two different blushes. Something to take note of. I'm gonna go ahead and put on the bronzer. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab this shade and put the bronzer on. On me, personally, I like the bronzer in the Dragon palette more than I do the Evil Eye. That's just me. I like the tone of it a little bit more, but you know, to each is their own. Now let's go into this color right here, which is a strobe powder. Okay, so that's it for the try-on portion of the video. I have so many thoughts running through my head right now. Let's go ahead and jump into the swatches and comparisons. I'm gonna swatch these three palettes next to other palettes from Hourglass from previous years, just so you guys can see how they compare, especially in tone. And then we'll go ahead and jump into my final thoughts. And boy, do I have a lot to say. So I will see you guys then. Okay, so I am back. I do hope that those swatches and comparisons were helpful. I think I've been swatching for like 3 hours. It's actually 9 o'clock. I started, oh my gosh, it's been 3.5 hours. So I do hope that those images were helpful. Let's go ahead and jump into my final thoughts. Okay, I'm gonna first start with the Lotus Flower palette. I actually really like this palette. When I swatched it next to the tiger, so this is the tiger on the top, I really like this Lotus Flower for a darker complexion more than I do the tiger palette. I think the tiger palette is really pretty, but I believe this is dark skin friendly even more than the tiger palette was last year. If you have a deeper complexion and you bought the tiger palette and maybe you didn't fully love it, you might really like this one. This is a really beautiful palette. The tones are gorgeous. This is going to be really beautiful on a darker complexion. As you can see in this image, the blushes are completely different. They're different tones. Like last year, you know, the tiger palette had more of those golden, like orangey, rusty kind of colors. This year, they just have deeper, rosy tones, which I think is going to be really pretty on a deeper complexion. And also the bronzer is a little darker in the Lotus palette than the tiger palette. As you can see in this swatch, especially under the flash, the bronzer in the Lotus Flower palette is a little bit darker than the one in the tiger palette. So overall, I think they really did a good job by stepping it up and providing a really beautiful palette for deeper complexions. And we've all kind of had this conversation multiple times that Hourglass has so often forgotten the deeper complexion in their launches. And I feel like they did a really good job this year. Okay, let's talk about the Dragon palette. I like the Dragon palette. I like that the blushes are different. This is a peachy color. This is more of a mauve rose tone. So the blushes are completely different, which I appreciate that. And the bronzer is very buildable, very beautiful. It applies really easily. It's a good palette. I like that there's not a lot of the same. I like the 2 finishing powders that they chose for this palette, and the highlighter is really beautiful. So overall, I really like the Dragon palette. I will say the Dragon palette and the Jellyfish palette were kind of similar in the swatches. If you have the Jellyfish palette, I don't know that you fully need the Dragon palette. If you look at this image right here, they're very similar. The only difference is the Dragon palette has this peachy blush, whereas the Jellyfish has more of the pink blushes. That's pretty much the only difference. Like the highlighter was the same, the bronzer was a little bit lighter, but they're very similar. So if you have the Jellyfish palette, I don't necessarily think that you need the Dragon, but overall it is a nice palette. Let's talk about the Evil Eye palette. Now, personally, this is the one that I was thinking I was going to gravitate towards because I felt like it was in that medium category, and I felt like this would be kind of the perfect palette for me and my complexion, but I don't love this palette. This is the palette I can say, I'm kind of disappointed because these 2 blushes are very similar on me. Like, I kind of figured that that was going to happen, but you can definitely see it in the swatch. Yes, there's a little bit of a difference. This has definitely got that pop of pink, and this is more of like a magenta color. But all in all, they're not different enough, in my personal opinion, on my complexion to make it worth it to have it in one palette. And especially because these palettes are $90. They're not like, we're not paying like $50 for these palettes. These are $90 palettes. So I was a little bit like, that these 2 blushes look that similar. Okay, that's number 1. But this, now, a lot of people might really like this shade. I have to preface this by saying, this is just me personally. A lot of people might really like this shade. They might like this as like a blush topper to kind of give a shine to like a matte blush. But for me, this shade does not come up on my complexion, and it's kind of a weird tone to where I don't know that it would go with a lot of the blush tones that I personally wear. It's a shade that I will probably never use. I will never pick up a brush and go into that and put it over top of my cheek. So because these 2 blushes are similar and there's a shade in there that I will never use, I don't really like the Evil Eye palette. I don't know. I don't understand. I mean, it's like a pearlized, it's like a pearlescent color. I just don't get it. Like, I don't get it. And yeah, I don't get it. I don't really love it. I'm just not a fan. So because there's like 2 issues out of the gate that I don't like about this palette, I just can't say that it was worth the $90 splurge to purchase it. So that's just my personal opinion. Other thing I wanted to mention, if you have the Snake palette from last year, the blushes are very similar to the 2 shades in the Evil Eye palette. So up here on the screen is an image of it next to them, side by side. And you can see that those 2 blush shades are very similar. Yes, the Snake palette is a little darker as far as like the highlighter in tone, but the bronzer is the same and the 2 blushes are the same. In my personal opinion, they're not different enough to look that different on the face. If you have the Snake palette from last year, I don't necessarily think you need the Evil Eye palette. That's just my personal opinion. So with all of that said, I think the palette that I personally like the most out of these 3 palettes is the Dragon palette. For all the reasons I mentioned, the blushes are different. They look different on the skin. The bronzer's really buildable and beautiful. It's just a kind of an everyday palette with beautiful powders. So out of all 3 of them, this is probably the one that I would reach for. I do hope this video was helpful. I hope that all of those images and comparisons were helpful for you to decide if you want to pick up a palette this year and which one you really need in your collection. They're very pricey, and I will be honest with you, when I first saw them, I was like, wah, wah, wah. Like, I was not very happy about these palettes because I kind of felt like they were the same. But I will say, knowing that all 3 of the palettes have 5 new shades in each of them, that helped me be more excited about it because there's nothing worse than these palettes having repeat blush shades. There's just no reason for it. I understand the ambient powders. I get that. Like the finishing powders. I totally get that. But there's no reason why we should have repeat shades either from previous holiday palettes or what they have in their collection. So I do like and appreciate that all of the bronzers and the blushes in all 3 of the palettes are all new shades, and highlighters for that matter. So I am very, very happy about that. And overall, I'm happy that they stepped it up this year and really gave a beautiful palette for a darker complexion. They did a good job on it, and I'm really impressed with the Lotus Flower, and I really hope that for those of you who have a darker complexion, I hope that you're excited to get it, and I hope it looks beautiful on you. By the way, I know the elephant in the room is, where the hell have I been? So, I'll be back soon. I got a lot to tell you guys. I got a lot to tell you. It's been a crazy summer, but I didn't want to put it in this review. So be on the look for a video coming up that's just kind of a chit chat and catch up with my crazy life. So that's it for the video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in today's video. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys all in my next video. Love you. Bye.